Hello and welcome to another edition of News for English Learners, Vocabulary Matters. Today we're going to be talking about an article which explains the problem of e-waste or electronic waste in the UK. And as usual, we'll read the article together. If you want to download the text, you can find it in the video description. And we'll also talk about some of the interesting words that we find along the way. So let's move on to the first paragraph. The UK is facing a growing problem of electronic waste, or e-waste, as people get rid of millions of devices every year. According to a recent report by the Environmental Audit Committee, the UK generates more e-waste per person than any other country except Norway, and only recycles a small proportion of it. The rest ends up in landfill, incinerators, or exported to developing countries. So let's have a look at the first phrase we have highlighted here. It is get rid of. Now, this is a phrase that we basically use when we're talking about disposing of something. So let's imagine, well, in this case, we're talking about technology. And as we all know, technology becomes obsolete very quickly these days, particularly things like mobile phones. People often want to buy a new one after only a year or a year and a half because there are new features like a better camera or the CPU is faster. And if they buy a new one, obviously they have to get rid of the old one because they don't need it anymore. So there are several options for that. You can give it away, perhaps to a friend or family. You can sell it second-hand, or you can throw it in the rubbish or the trash. Now, all of those options would be covered by this, because get rid of just means that, to dispose of something that you don't want or you don't need. And this, of course, generates a problem when we are constantly getting rid of electronic products. This creates a lot of waste, a lot of e-waste. So let's move on to the second word here we find down at the bottom, that is landfill. Now we can see that this noun is composed of two other words. The first one is land, which is a noun and a verb. As a noun, it refers basically to the earth, and as a verb, it's what aeroplanes do when they come into the airport. They touch down on the land. The second word is fill, which is a regular verb. When you fill something, take a glass, for example, that is empty and you fill it with water or with other liquids. That means you're pouring the water into the glass and until it reaches the top. Then we say the glass is full. You have filled the glass. Now, in a similar way, when we get rid of rubbish, things that we don't need, we can incinerate it. That means it can be burnt, or in some cases, some of that waste can be exported to other countries where they process it. And the third option is to simply dump it or to put it in a big hole in the land. So machines are used to dig a big hole, and gradually that hole is filled with the rubbish. And that is what it is talking about here. A lot of this e-waste that is disposed of is just thrown into the land in a big hole. So that obviously is generating a problem, because as that hole fills up, they have to dig another hole and find another place to dump it. So let's move on to the second paragraph. E-waste is not only a waste of resources, but also a ticking time bomb to the environment and human health. E-waste contains hazardous substances such as lead, mercury, and cadmium, which can leach into the soil and water and release toxic fumes when burned. E-waste also contributes to climate change, as the production and disposal of electronic devices account for 4% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So the first phrase we have highlighted here is this idiom, ticking time bomb. Now, the word ticking is often associated with clocks, right? Old-fashioned clocks, mechanical clocks, used to tick. They made a sound that sounded a little bit like ticking as the pendulum swung from one side to the other. So in this case, the ticking is associated with a bomb. A time bomb is a bomb that is set to explode after a certain amount of time has expired. So you can imagine that time bomb is ticking along, and when the time or the countdown reaches 0, when the time runs out, the bomb would explode or blow up, to use the phrasal verb. Obviously, in this case, it's an idiom, so we're not talking literally of a bomb here, but we are talking about a bad consequence. Obviously, if a bomb explodes, most people would consider that to be very bad. So here, the time bomb is the devastating impact that the e-waste is going to have on the environment and human health in the future. So the idea is that some point in the future, the bomb will explode and we will suffer the consequence of our actions now. So moving on to the second word in this paragraph, we have the word leach. This is a verb, it's a regular verb, and it should not be confused with another word which sounds the same. There is a homophone of this, which is spelled L-E-E-C-H. Now that kind of leech is actually an animal. It's an animal, an invertebrate that lives in wet environments, and when it comes into contact with a human or an animal, it attaches itself to the skin and makes an incision and sucks the blood to feed itself. This leech, however, is nothing to do with that. This is a regular verb, and it's almost the opposite. Instead of sucking something or ingesting it, this one is all about releasing some substance or dissolving it. So in this case, the e-waste that is buried in the landfill or dumped on the land, as you can see in these two pictures over here, gradually over time, with the action of water, it dissolves the poisonous materials, and those spread out into the land. They leak into the land. In fact, that word leak, that regular verb, is etymologically connected with leach. It is quite similar. In the case of leak, if we have a tube in our house that has a hole in it, water or gas will escape. It will leak. So it's fairly similar to the idea of leaching things into the soil, right? They're also escaping and seeping into the surrounding area. So moving on to the last word here, we have the word fume. This is a noun, and it goes in combination with the word toxic. Now, fume is fairly simple to explain. It's very similar to smoke. So when you burn something, you produce smoke that you can see. Usually it's black or gray, and sometimes smells really bad, and it can also be toxic. The main difference between smoke and fumes is that fumes are not always visible. Very often they're invisible. So certain chemicals can release fumes. They can smell and maybe be toxic or poisonous, but you wouldn't actually see them. So that is something to be aware of. Okay, moving on to the final paragraph. The chair of the committee, Philip Dunn, MP, said, "We are in the middle of a global e-waste crisis. The UK is lagging behind other countries in dealing with this issue, and we need to step up our efforts. We cannot afford to waste our precious resources, pollute our planet, and harm our health by dumping our unwanted gadgets in the bin." So let's turn to the first word here. We have the verb lag, to lag. This is a regular verb, and this is often associated with making very slow progress. Probably the easiest way to think of this, certainly if you like or you are interested in computing or even gaming, is to think about that context, because when a computer game experiences lag, that means there is a delay between the input. So if I press a button and nothing happens for a couple of seconds, that's what we call a lag. And it's often produced when you have a slow internet connection, because when you press a button, that information needs to be transmitted to a server, which could be very far away. And obviously that takes time. That lag, that input lag, makes it very difficult to play the game. So it's obviously a bad thing in gaming. In other contexts, if you lag behind, similarly, there is a delay in your performance, in your work rate, if you like. So that usually means you have to work faster in order to catch up with the other people. So if you are a student in a class and you fail to do your homework in a timely way, then eventually you will lag behind the rest of your classmates or your colleagues at work, and therefore you'd have to work faster to catch up with them. So in this case, it's saying, this member of the committee is saying that the UK is not working fast enough to deal with this problem. It is lagging behind the other countries. Moving on to the next word, we have the phrasal verb to step up. Now, if you know what steps are, then you can kind of imagine what the meaning of this phrasal verb is. We use steps in order to go from one floor of a building to the next, either up or down. In this case, we're talking about stepping up. We are walking up the steps or the stairs. So you can get that idea of increasing, going up. And that is essentially what this means here. It can sometimes mean to increase the speed, or the size, or the amount of something. So in this case, we're talking about increasing the effort that is being made to deal with the problem of e-waste. But equally, you could, a factory could talk about stepping up production of a particular product, maybe that is becoming more popular, so they have to produce more of that product. The government could talk about stepping up security at airports. If there is a particular threat to security, they would have to increase the measures that they take to deal with that. Okay, so let's move on to the next word. This is waste. This can be a noun or a verb. And if we are talking about it as a verb, as in this case, then what we are talking about is to spend or to use something badly or inefficiently. To be wasteful is the adjective. And if you are wasteful with money or time or resources, you're not using them in an efficient or a wise way, really. So if you go to a casino and you spend a lot of money gambling rather than using the money for more important things, most people would consider that to be a waste of money because you're not really using money in a productive way. Equally, if you spend your time using social media, a lot of people would consider that to be a waste of time as well. And it's very important, especially in times of climate change, not to waste precious resources, right? Like here where I live, we are experiencing a severe drought. There's a lack of water. So it's very important not to waste water. We should only use it for important purposes in an efficient way. And in this case, in the article, the member of the committee is saying that we shouldn't waste our resources just by throwing it away. We should try to recycle them and reuse them. The penultimate word we have here is dumping. To dump is basically when we just leave something carelessly. As I talked about before, when you get rid of something, you have various options. One of those options is to just throw it away, to dump it. In this case, that is what we're doing with a lot of our electronic waste. We also use dump as a noun to refer to the place where people throw rubbish. Idiomatically, if you dump someone, that means that you have finished a relationship. You have told them that you don't want to carry on seeing them and the relationship is over. So you've dumped them. Okay, moving on to the final word we have here. This is a noun, and it is the word gadget. And this word basically refers to something like a device or a tool that is used for a very specific purpose. Sometimes high tech, as in the case of a mobile phone, a smartphone, but not necessarily so. In fact, there are many so-called kitchen gadgets, tools that we use in the kitchen for doing specific tasks, like peeling things, or different fruits or vegetables, or removing different parts, or processing them in some way. There are even machines that will basically cook for you. There's a thing called a Thermomix, and also there are bread machines. You put the ingredients, the flour, the yeast, and the water in the machine, and it will mix it and prepare the bread and cook the bread for you. So in modern life, we have many different kinds of gadgets, many of them technological. A good example from popular culture of gadgets could be the fictional character of James Bond, sometimes known as 007. Because if you've ever seen one of those movies, you will know that the character is a spy, and he's famous for using a lot of gadgets which are produced by another character called Q, who's head of the research and development. And he can incorporate gadgets into things like watches, or even his car is full of different gadgets to make it go faster, or to have different weapons, or to escape from dangerous situations. So that is really a good example of using gadgets in the fictional world. That's the end of today's article. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you have perhaps learned some new words or new meanings. If you have, don't forget to check out my other videos. I have a playlist of long news videos, and also another playlist of short videos, 1-minute videos, focusing just on one particular word taken from these articles. So don't forget to check those out, and I hope to see you next time I release a video.